tonight's panel. How many of you have supported a Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaign? Okay. How many of you have run a campaign? Run a campaign.
I'm heavily invested in potato salad.
Our point exactly. Congratulations. I hope you get a delicious bite of potato salad. And how many of you are considering running a crowdfunding campaign? Terrific. Well, I am hoping that these guys and myself will be able to provide a little bit of perspective in terms of execution, sort of how you do this, why you would do it, and really some tactical decision making about when you want to do it and some of the different resources that you need in place in order to do it. I'm going to briefly introduce both the panelists and then we'll get rolling. Leo Trottier is going to start off. He ran a nearly 180,000 or 180,000 plus. How much?
8,623.
You know the dollar number. So I call it 180,000. He knows it to the individual dollar. So they just finished running a $180,000 Kickstarter campaign for a clever pet toy tool. Chance Roth of Brain Corporation, which is working on stuff far outside of my IQ range, artificial intelligence and robotics, actually was responsible for the AirDroids campaign, which to date is the largest campaign here in San Diego. They raised $929,000 and change. That's right. Woo! So I think these guys are going to be a wealth of information, and I think for those kind of considering a campaign, I think these are the guys that we're lucky enough to have access to. So enough from me. You'll hear from me later. Leo, all you.
So we launched. Let's see here. Point it. Thanks.
You have to turn on the remote.
There we go. Something's happening. So we had a campaign where we're selling a device that will engage your dog over the course of the day when you're out of the house. Dogs spend thousands of hours each year bored with nothing to do all day. And so what Clever Pet does is it stimulates your dog to play games that involve touching touchpads that light up, kind of like Simon. The great thing about Clever Pet is that it rewards your dog using his own food. So in the morning, instead of putting your dog's food into a dog bowl, can you advance the slide? There you go. I guess you don't have the font that we were using. Okay, so that's in a different font normally, but so it actually fits. But typically, it fits. The good thing about it is you reward your dog with your own food. Rather the food that your dog would normally eat in the morning, you put your dog's food in Clever Pet, and over the course of the day, it stimulates your dog to learn how to do new and interesting different things over the course of the day. So when you come home, your dog isn't bored because he's been spending all this time like sleeping and feeling frustrated because he was bred to work all day. Instead, he comes home exhausted from mental stimulation. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So a question I often get is when should I launch my crowdfunding campaign? And the answer to that question actually is that it depends. And it depends on a lot of different things. The first is like how much money do you want to raise? If you're if you don't really need to raise that much money, you can launch earlier because it's typically the case that the campaigns that do the best are the ones that are very close to delivering a product. They're kind of much later on in their development schedule. So if you're looking to raise, I would say less than $150,000 or $200,000, launching early, probably okay. This is intimately tied to the next thing, which is if you're looking to, say your company has been in stealth mode or something, and you need to like reveal to the world what you're up to. Well, you could reveal to the world what you're up to and then pursue maybe sign-ups for a newsletter and then use those sign-ups to prove to a venture capitalist or something that you've got people that are interested in what you're doing. Or you can use the Kickstarter campaign to kind of launch your company. If that's the case, then you're not going to be probably that far along in your development process. Maybe you will, but chances are you won't. If that's the case, you might want to choose to launch earlier in your development process. On the other hand, if you're an established company and you're just a person that has a really cool idea for a particular product and you don't necessarily think that product will be a core product to your company's future success, if you're just trying to sell a particular thing, then you should probably wait later on. Similarly, if you're a startup and you're pre-seed, it might make more sense to do it earlier. On the other hand, if you've already raised a bunch of seed money and you're going to have to do a Kickstarter campaign to prove to VCs that they should give you $5 million to $10 million, then you should probably wait till pretty late in the process, because frankly, if you've not done a Kickstarter campaign with an excess of $500,000 or $600,000 of backing, a Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaign, Indiegogo, if you've not raised in excess of $500,000, it'll be very difficult for you to convince VCs that there's enough of a market for what you're doing.
Even if you raise that much.
And even if you raise that much, it'll be hard. The key thing for investors at the VC level is you being able to convince them that the company you're building will be worth $1 billion, which actually interestingly interacts with the are you selling a product? If you're just selling a product and not starting a company that's going to be worth $1 million, then you probably shouldn't be pursuing VC money later on. Another big factor is the thing that you're doing super novel, or is it like another kind of wallet? I mean, there's lots of wallets out there. Wallets are great, don't get me wrong. But a wallet is kind of like a product. It's not super novel. It's not like you've got this idea that you want to stake a claim to be like, we're the first ones to have done this, which was actually our situation as CleverPet. We wanted to be the first ones to automatically direct with pets and have everyone have that idea in their mind when they saw another product. So if you're super novel, launch early. If you're not super novel, you don't think it's like a game-changing thing, then maybe wait later. There's a variety of other factors, things like, is the device that you're making super design-oriented? So if it's like a special kind of, perhaps it's a ring that you need that has an accelerometer on it, and you're using it to control things in your world, that's a very design-heavy offering, and it might be worthwhile to wait until later on to launch on a product like that. If what you're doing is relatively easy to duplicate, that means if you launch really early, you might have someone else coming on and saying, well, look, they did so well, I can do the exact same thing, and I've got better connections in China, so I'll be able to get out before them. Similarly, if people think it's really hard to be done, then if you launch really early, people won't believe you, and they're not going to back your campaign, and so it'll be a lot harder for you to actually raise money. And if you're a new group of people that doesn't have a lot of hardware experience, it's going to take more work to convince people that you're worth backing, which means...
Can you just expand on that in terms
Right.
of product risk?
Right.
Talk a little bit about that.
So product risk refers to the difficulty associated with actually getting a product to market. So if you're a new if you're a bunch of people that have never actually made a product before, then you will find it very challenging probably to convince a bunch of backers in the world that what you're doing, that you'll be able to execute on what you're doing. So product risk is a very real thing. Most crowdfunding campaigns don't ship their product until months or sometimes years after their targeted ship date. And so, and the thing that usually impacts a team's ability to actually deliver on the thing that they promised is the experience that the team has in actually developing and shipping products. So if you think it's really easy for people to believe that you're a team that can launch a great product, then yeah, you can launch relatively early in the development process because people will believe you. If on the other hand, you're a 25-year-old straight out of college and you've never done a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding campaign before, then you might have to, then the burden of proof will be higher on you that you can actually deliver. So you should probably wait later in your development process. So do you guys have any questions on this kind of contrast between reasons to launch a crowdfunding campaign early in your development process and reasons to launch a crowdfunding campaign later in your process?
Yeah, we can take questions now.
Just very briefly on this slide.
When you say less and more, what's the ballpark for cash?
Less and more.
Yeah, you said less money and more money. Do you have like a...
So I would say less money would be anything under about $200,000. More money would be anything above about $500,000.
What was your goal?
Our goal in our Kickstarter campaign was $100,000. We raised $180,000. So in our case, we felt that we met actually most of the criteria on this left column. Except it was probably harder for us to prove to people that we could do it, but we actually teamed up with a product engineering firm in order to help mitigate that concern. So that's why we actually launched relatively early in our development process. Go ahead.
Is it commonplace to raise like way more than $200,000 on Kickstarters? Like, I haven't really heard of a whole lot that raise that much, but I don't know.
No, it's not common. It's very rare. Like, it's only the top 1 or 2% of campaigns.
I think you're even going, I think that's too many. Right now, I think there are 67,000 campaigns that have been successfully run. I think 63 of them are north of $1 million.
Yeah.
Chance almost got there.
Well, that's why I set the bar.
Yeah, no,
and it's a curve that looks like
Yeah, some of those are consumer products, some of those are like...
What's the average? What's
Movies.
the typical?
the average is $7,500 bucks.
Yeah, it follows a very skewed distribution.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean the average for sort of a hit huge product is different than the average from all projects. But you're looking around something between $7,000 and $10,000.
And technology hardware products typically do much better than, say, one would say potato salad, but potato salad does quite well.
What about services versus products?
Most crowdfunding campaigns that I know of don't really lend themselves well to services.
It's hard
With
because
scalability.
it's scalable. I think the thing about crowdfunding, and I think you sort of brought this up yesterday on our chat, but people need to feel like what you're doing, they can like touch it and see it and believe that they can use it. And so we actually crowdfund a piece of software. And it's very hard to tell people, hey, our software is going to do these 10 things, we promise. And so hardware is really something that people can get behind.
Follow-up question.
Sure.
Are there demographics on people who are doing crowdsourcing so that if you're trying to target a market, you know whether or not those kind of people are going on there?
I mean, you can listen to these guys on that, but I think it's going to depend what you're funding. Different folks are going to fund potato salad, then are going to fund a drone project, then are going to fund a comic book, then are going to fund a game project, then are going to fund Veronica Mars. So it really depends what vertical you're in.
But I'll just touch that on that. The demographics of Kickstarter is growing very, very quickly.
Yeah.
It used to be a lot more early adopters and become much more mainstream in the past 6 months.
Consumer mainstream?
What's that?
Consumer mainstream?
More, yeah. I mean, like the top retailers now troll Kickstarter for what's going to be the next hot product. So you can imagine that.
One more and then we'll get rolling.
For software products, do you think it's better to have the product ready for use before launching? In other words, you mentioned that if the investors...
Let's come back to that.
Yeah.
It'll be the first thing we talk about in the Q&A.
Okay.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah. So this is a not comprehensive list, but if you've got a lot of these things, your crowdfunding campaign will go a lot better. You want to have, probably one of the most important things, Kickstarter tells you this, but you want to have an awesome video. It's kind of hard to underinvest in a great video.
How much did you guys spend on your video?
So our deal was a few thousand actually just flat, and then a percentage of the amount that we raised.
So that's a substantial, I mean, it probably ends up being close to a $10,000-$15,000 investment.
That would not be out of the ballpark.
Right.
So it's worth, if you want to have a campaign that's in excess of $100,000 in terms of the amount of money that you raise, that's totally a reasonable amount of money, in my opinion, to spend on a video. You want to make sure you've got like a product that seems very real. So having one that's like branded, something that someone could easily see being in a store is really important. You want to make sure your campaign looks, ultra professional. You want to make sure you start your PR, getting journalists to write about you as early as possible. The earlier, the better, which can conflict with your desire potentially to remain a little bit stealthy. So that's just a difficult problem that's associated with launching a new product. You want your website, which is separate from your Kickstarter page, but you want your website to look super professional. Journalists who see your Kickstarter campaign will go to your website and will evaluate you based on, in order to see how serious you are, based on the quality of your page, in your homepage, like whatever your domain name.com. You want to have a good press kit, otherwise people will be coming at you and asking you for pictures for them to use in news articles. And then finally, this is a really great and super important tactic. So it's important to remember this one well. It's very important to have a bunch of people, I would say at least 50, probably as many as a few hundred, who are ready to go, already committed to supporting your campaign. Enlist these people from within your network. Ask your friends, ask the friends of your friends to just fill out a Google Doc form and tease them, or maybe even tell them what the product actually is, and say like, if this is as cool as we say it's going to be, are you willing to commit? And kind of work on the fact that if they say no to you, that'll be kind of sad. So they'll want to say yes, and some proportion of those people you can then target to help you out on your first day. And what we did was we actually had everyone give us their cell phone number. We offered some like rewards for giving us that information. And then we sent them all a big text. We used the Twilio to send a text message to everyone the minute the campaign started, so that we had $12,000 on our first day. That was really important for us. Next slide. That's can't overstate how important that is. This is what, based on my reflections of Kickstarter, our Kickstarter campaign, you want to make sure that when you see your product, if you imagine yourself as a different person, you say, oh, I want that. That's something that absolutely I want to have. If that's not the response you get, if you look at basically every successful Kickstarter campaign, when you look at that campaign, or at least when I look at that campaign, when those other successful campaigns, I want all the things. Now, I haven't actually spent money on them, but the bar is at least I should want the thing. And so you should really want the thing that you're selling, or it's going to be hard for you to do well.
Or you can at least understand why someone who's really interested in that would want the thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's another one. Another really big thing is you want to make, because you're selling a promise, you're not actually selling a real thing, because the thing doesn't exist yet. You want to be very convincing as to how real that thing is. And the more clues you can provide to people, the stronger the signal is that the thing that you're making is really real, the more people will believe in you. So I actually think that the one equation, as it were, for that realness is how easy is it for the people to understand what you're selling, which explains partially why a cooler did so well, plus the stage of product development that you can demonstrate. So if you've got those two things, and your thing's kind of novel, then it'll be a very believable product. You also have to be super likable. Hopefully I'm doing a good job of that now, but if people need to want you personally to succeed, because they're going to be plumping down money, and they know that there's a chance they're not going to get anything for it. And they want to feel like, well, even if this thing doesn't succeed, at least he was a nice guy. So that's really important. I'll just leave it at that. When you launch, as I mentioned, you want to be launched really strong within the first minutes and hours, and certainly on the first day. You want to have a lot of media attention. That'll certainly impact it. Your idea should be something that people are interested in talking about with their friends at work or whatever. And then, this is another thing I think is quite important for virality. You want your thing to be easy and pithy for other people to describe. So you want to, as the person launching the Kickstarter campaign, you want to make it really easy for Tim to say to Sarah, oh, I saw this cool thing on Kickstarter, for instance. It is on blah. Like, you have to provide that blah to them. In our case, we actually had to change our entire Kickstarter campaign from being like all-day automatic play for dogs, which didn't lend itself to any kind of virality. And instead we said, well, we're a game console for your dog. That's the kind of thing that people are like, oh, that's cool, I'll talk about that, you know. So that's Leo's tips on running a good Kickstarter campaign and when you should.
Awesome. Well, that was really good. Just in an effort to keep things moving. Again, Chance, you know, one of the larger Kickstarter campaigns that's ever been run. So I would, and some of you may have heard this pitch before, or this speech before, but it's impressive. So I would listen closely. Chance, go ahead.
Thanks. This is the abridged version of my Kickstarter talk. So when you do kind of nearly $1 million of Kickstarter, people start asking you a lot of questions, and you want to know what you did to make it so successful. So I'll try to talk about the highlights of what we did. Okay, so my credentials for running the campaign is I run the San Diego Drone User Group, and by the way, it's a campaign for a drone. So it's called the Pocket Drone, and back to my credentials. So San Diego Drone User Group, I organized that. I started that. I also started the HTML5 web developer community. So basically, I'm very involved in the community and getting people involved in things that are hot and things that are attention grabbing. So, and I also am a entrepreneur in residence at the Fab Lab, which is a place where people who are makers go and use 3D printers and CNC mills. And if you haven't heard about it, go check it out. It's a pretty cool space for getting things off the ground on the hardware level. So I help run the San Diego Maker Fair, the drones space specifically. And I've been an entrepreneur for about 15 years. I used to own a toy manufacturing company called Atomic Toys. And you may remember those small remote control cars that were really popular about 10 years ago. We were the first company to bring those in to the country and sold a couple million of them. So I'm no newbie to manufacturing and importing and getting stuff on the shelf, essentially.
Well, I think, just to interrupt for a second, I think what Chance is sort of pointing out is basically what Leo was saying, where here's a guy that we can trust who's going to deliver the toy or the drone that he says he's going to deliver.
And I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of people do this not knowing what it really takes to get injection molding done, and the financing and the deposits that are going to be needed to be put down, and FCC approvals and all that type of stuff. So I'll skip the rest, but I've done lots of licensing deals and with the toy company and that type of thing. So if we want to advance the slide. So the Kickstarter campaign was the Pocket Drone. It was the #1 highest grossing Kickstarter in San Diego, aside from Veronica Mars, which I don't count because it's not a consumer product. It's okay. And we're in the top 50 on the platform in total. Also in the consumer product side, I think. So I think it matters a lot of what your product is. So ours drones happen to be white hot right now. We launched our Kickstarter campaign 2 weeks after Jeff Bezos was talking about his Amazon Air product or program service. And so it was really perfect time, perfect price, perfect product. So I'd like to take credit for the entire raise, but we had a lot of help from the timing aspect. So Kickstarter prefers artistic products, so they say, because they want to be artsy and that type of thing. But it's really, at the end of the day, how much money they can put in their pockets. So they'll approve anything that's, or they approve a lot of things that they say they may not, but clearly potato salad and coolers are okay. So what we did is we looked at other products that were on the platform. There were no other products that competed directly with what we're trying to do. A fold-up drone about the size of a 7-inch tablet, the footprint of a 7-inch tablet, and it folded up. You can take it anywhere. So we had a lot of novel aspects to what we were putting together. You need to be prepared to ship a lot of units if you are indeed successful. And that's another whole can of worms. So there were 3 of us working on the project. I was the CEO, and I had another guy who was even more of the community aspect of stuff than I am. And he's in Washington, D.C. doing regulation, and he has the largest drone user group in the country with about 1,000 members. I've got about 400 locally. We went through about 50 prototypes. We had nearly 2,000 backers. That's the dollar amount we raised. Our goal was only our goal was only $35,000, and we did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, we wanted to blow it away day one. And that's another marketing point. You can go say, hey, blew it away day one. We actually made $100,000 day one. And there's a couple of reasons for that I'll get to on an upcoming slide. People were breaking down our doors to comment and talk to us. We now have 17 updates talking about when they're going to deliver. And thousands of people have contacted us. Lots of articles written about us. We created a pretty perfect storm. Okay, so content. So this is talking about what Leo did. Get the best photos you can afford. I actually have some friends that was a photographer. We got our photography for. It was interesting because I was originally going on the barter system. I was like, oh, you know, we were thinking we were going to make 125 to 250. We were hoping. And so it's like, okay, we'll give you a drone because these guys are photographers and they could use it. Obviously, clearly they could use a drone in their line of work. Once we raised a lot more, they were like, they had their hand out a little more. So we had to kind of kick in some cash as well. And then the same thing with the videographer. So he made us a really awesome video, and it was, you know, you get a drone and some, you know, it's service and support, whatever, and you know, it turns out, you know, money talks, I guess. One of the key things I did was we identified the 10 highest grossing consumer product Kickstarters, and basically when I was writing my content, I made sure that I had all the key points that they had. So the best example I have is that one of our competitors, it was the Hex copter. It was a little small 3D printed copter, and what they did is they spelled out line items of the 10 key unique points about their product in a outline form at the top, and then down below they reiterated the line item, and then they had some copy talking about it. There was also a piece where I went back and did like a little history lesson about you know, a little more touchy-feely, where we talked about the first era of photography and, you know, the San Francisco earthquake and how the aerial kite photography was used to identify the worst hit areas. So kind of you know, the feature portion of the content. And why our team will be successful. So our team was a former CEO of a toy company with manufacturing experience, a community leader, and the second was a community leader and regulatory guy, and the third guy was a patent attorney / mechanical engineer. So we had a really solid team that sounded like we could make what we were talking about. And that little history lesson I mentioned.
Question.
Yes.
So the investors are not interested in really that you have invested a little bit of money, except for the time you are investing. For example, family, friends, and folks, as we used to do.
So let me just be real clear. Everything we're talking about up here today is rewards-based crowdfunding. So when somebody backs a project on Kickstarter, they are not an investor in the company. They're not taking a stake in the company. There is no percentage interest. There is no carry. There's nothing like that. In the case of, let's say, Oculus Rift, when all these backers were pissed off that they weren't compensated when they were acquired for $2 billion, it really doesn't matter. So we could talk about equity crowdfunding, but that's a completely different topic. So I don't know if you want to expand on that, but this is strictly a rewards-based thing.
The idea is that hopefully you will get the product you say you're going to make at the end if you meet the certain reward requirements, which I'm going to talk about on this slide. So less choices is better. So the fewer rewards you have, the more likely you are if someone's going to actually click on it and hit the pay button. There's a really good TED talk about
Paradise of choice.
Yes, but I was going to say there's a store in Palo Alto where there's like 300 jams, and nobody ever bought the jams because they couldn't decide which one to get. So go check that out. And that totally applies here. So we had a minimum, I think we had like 8 choices, and we felt that was even too much. Yes, so offer a small donation level. I would definitely suggest not wasting your time with t-shirts and stickers, because that's just, stick to what you're good at.
They're not your customers. T-shirts and stickers, they're not buying your widget.
Yeah, I mean, they may walk around with your shirt on, right. But it's a whole other thing that you don't want to be distracted with, in my opinion. So we didn't initially enable international shipping because it was just a big can of worms. We finally figured it out about when we hit the $500,000 mark. We opened up international shipping because we felt like we had a little leeway to do that, and we also talked about the VATs. So you probably talked to your accountants, and you'll probably be worried about shipping implications, and if your customers on the other end, you're going to have to pay some value-added tax, and the answer is no. It's from what I've learned. So ship it as a gift. And there's lots of, if you want a good recommendation on an international shipping agent, I can help you with that. You just ask. And so once you set a reward level and someone actually clicks on it and buys it, you can no longer change that. So be really careful about how you price and build your little reward base. So goals. So our goal, like I mentioned, was $35,000, and I set it artificially low just because I knew I wanted to blow through it. And like I said, day one we had about 100,000, so I think we were about 2,000% of what our ask was, if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, it'll give you another marketing opportunity and ensures you get your money when you actually want to pull the trigger. Okay, so duration. We didn't talk about duration at all. A lot of people go 30 days, and I feel like that is just too short a time to be on the platform. Why not go 60 days if it's an opportunity to be on sale for a lot longer? You don't want to go 45 days because then it looks like you've been 15 days with no sales, in my opinion. So I went the full 60, and I think it worked out for us pretty well. I think I talked about each of those. I'm getting good at this. So pre-production. So it's been a while since I looked at these. So pricing, yeah, you want to have all your ducks in a row. So you don't want to undersell yourself. You don't want to be able to make sure you deliver on time. You want to know what your lead times are, what your costs are, what your deposits are going to be, any FCC regulations, any governmental regulations. Drones in particular, you can't export drones with software in them, so you have to have some mechanism for installing software onto them later. Any embargoes, you don't want to be shipping it to countries. I wasn't going to name any countries.
You guys didn't elaborate on pricing. How important is pricing here?
Pricing is very important. We spent a long time trying to figure out what our price is going to be. And there's some magic numbers, right? So our price for our early bird special, we cut about $50 off. So it's $4.95 for the standard package. which included the controller. We cut $50 off for no controllers. And then for camera, we found a good source that was $100 more.
So why pricing is important? Can you guys elaborate? Look, when you go to market, right, in general,
Yeah.
pricing is very important.
So I guess, and we can handle this quickly, you guys can weigh in. I think the biggest thing is whether or not you're sort of doing this to be a profitable business or whether or not you're trying to kind of develop a loss leader approach.
Right.
And if you want to be profitable on each reward, you better charge, like if your t-shirt costs $10 and it actually costs $15 to make and ship, you're an idiot. If your widget costs, $500 and, your Kickstarter campaign is at $250, what are you doing?
Plus, you also have to look at your competition, what they're selling at, and a lot of Kickstarters price low, and then try to, just sort of to get the sales in the door. And you have to kind of decide whether or not this is actually your sales vehicle or a marketing tool to get you.
It's a marketing tool. If it's a marketing, how do you feel a Kickstarter crowd? How do they feel about pricing? Do they ask you questions? Do they try to
As long as you
negotiate?
price it right, they shouldn't ask too many questions. So, right. So $489 is actually inexpensive. One of our main marketing points is that we have a very expensive drone that has a lot of high quality features. So that was priced under $500. That was kind of, and that was the right stuff to say.
Just a question. Is this applicable only to prior to starting a company phase or after you've already established a company, launching, say, a new product within a company?
I
I think it's both, really.
Yeah, I think it's both.
It's,
I don't think
it's the same. I mean, it depends on how established you are. I mean, there's companies right now, there's one out of LA. I don't know if who's familiar with the Bravo Tech. It's kind of like a geeky thing. But I like it. But they're a multi-million-dollar company doing a Kickstarter campaign. So I think you can do it in both ways. Okay, and ship on time because that makes everyone look good. Even though the pocket drone is shipping 2 months late. Okay. Launching. Okay, so this is the most important thing I think I can tell you. So Leo was telling you about how to front load your sales via your friends and your own network. I think we didn't do any of that. But personally, I think the best way is to launch in conjunction with the media, trade, or some kind of competition, vendor competition. So what we did is we applied to compete in the TechCrunch hardware battlefield at CES in Las Vegas, and we made it to the finals on that. So you can't get better than TechCrunch, you can't get better than CES, can't get better than Vegas. And it creates all these gigantic talking points for you to kind of continue on and make your product a hit. At day one, we were in Wall Street Journal and TechCrunch, obviously, because it's a TechCrunch thing, and like in a bunch of other magazines, a bunch of other tech blogs, and in print and all over the place. And it was kind of steamrolled from there. So I think nothing better than that. Go back. And have your website up, like Leo said. So you get your press, PR list in order. I think Leo touched on that. And we launched in the middle of the night. And I think that was beneficial because when we woke up the next morning, we had $50,000 of sales. While we're sleeping. So you can imagine how we woke up that morning. So updates every other week.
Why did you launch in the middle of the night?
Why?
Yes.
It's kind of like an eBay thing. I mean, I've done a lot of eBay things, and it was on a Sunday night, so we just wanted to have. That's my rationale for that.
When people get to work, it doesn't look like they're staring at an empty campaign. It looks like they're staring at something that people care about.
Yes.
Okay, here's the real reason, is because TechCrunch didn't allow us to do it until day of. So that was one reason. So it was day of competition, bam, 12/10, we put our Kickstarter up, and we put our website up simultaneously.
An email blast.
The reason I asked is because the previous speaker mentioned the importance of having everybody buy the first minute, the campaign in the list. So I was just curious.
Yeah, so we had the advantage of being a drone. I'm like, it was, like I said, right. The timing and the product had a lot to do with it. So, Closing, yeah, so send out thank you letters. So this is the one thing we didn't do, which you may have done, which I would highly recommend, is that if you don't do it, you don't get a chance to fix it. So Kickstarter allows you to edit the content of your page up until it closes. So on the last day, you want to change everything to say, thanks for playing, and go visit our website, and you can go buy it here. So we didn't do that. We missed probably a decent amount of percentage of sales. Just savvy Kickstarter runners do that. I will do it if I do it again. So thank you everyone. Let's see what the next one is. So after it closes, you want to have your website for your upselling of batteries and propellers or whatever your product requires. And it takes about 14 days to get your money from Kickstarter after they take their 7%. 5 of which goes to Kickstarter, 2% of which goes to Amazon payments, and you have to have, so that's the part we haven't talked about, is how much of a business you have to actually have established before you file it, and you have to have at least an EIN number. It doesn't necessarily have to be a DBA, so there's ways around kind of almost being a corporation and having your EIN and being able to do that. I recommend, for partnership's sake and for your own sake, making a new Amazon account specifically for this, or else if problems go awry, you may lose your Amazon account that you've had for 15, 18 years. Lesson learned right here. Reflections. So it's both a blessing and a curse. So yeah, you got your market validation, you got a bunch of sales. Now you have to fulfill those orders and deal with all the customer service stuff and public at large. It's and there's like, if you get inundated by customer service requests, it's just a lot to handle. So if you have a 3-man team, you got to do what you got to do. So like I said, right product, right time, right price. We get a lot of attention, but it's a lot of work. It's going from 0 to 60 overnight. So all of a sudden you got a company and you got to deal with real company problems. So we actually spent a lot of time with our accountants to figure out what we needed to do to account for all the sales when we actually book the sales, and like I mentioned, the VATs and stuff like that. And the most important thing, well, not the most important thing, ultimately the most important thing for me was that I didn't work out between our partners. So I'm no longer the CEO of the company that put this campaign together. And that's just kind of how things work out. I'm glad I found out earlier than later. Now I put the entire Kickstarter campaign together, all the media, I'd like to think it was mostly me. So I get to take all that credit and I don't have to deliver on the product. So that's kind of that.
How much bookkeeping does the platform provide in terms of tracking?
Very little. In fact, their system is very convoluted, very messed up. There's 3 different ways you can get communication. There's comments, there's direct messaging, and then there's people who find your email that contact you directly. So, and none of them line up. None of them funnel into each other. It's like you got to check the comments section, you got to check the messaging section, and then you got to handle your email too. So there's much to be improved in that particular aspect of it.
Does it, if you do it as an individual and you raise $100,000 or $1 million, does that count as income?
Good question.
It depends on how you set
Talk to your
up.
accountant.
Yeah, it depends on how you
Because
set
the
up.
3 of us are not accountants. Talk to your accountant.
Okay.
Very likely it could. So, yeah.
Chance, thank you again. This is the second time I'm listening to this. Still enjoying. You're doing better.
Okay.
Question for you. You said something. You shared an insight. When do you launch? And you said that launch when there's an event, and so on and so on. And then you said a competitor. Can you elaborate on the competitor thing?
Competition.
Yeah, competition. So what is it? What does it
So
mean?
like some kind of like hackathon or some way that someone else is doing media around a particular event that you can capitalize on. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, if you're launching a new comic around Comic-Con.
Oh, so not a competitor, a competition.
Yeah, exactly. So you could do that too, and piggyback off their guerrilla marketing on.
Right.
I mean, people do that all the time. So it's definitely another way to do it.
I'm going to hold off on a couple of questions, mostly because I want to talk. My thing is quick, and I'm hoping that I can answer some of your questions within the presentation. That's okay. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to kind of hit, a lot of these guys have really hit the hows very in detail, and I kind of want to hit the whys. So everybody here is probably somewhat schooled in the lean startup, lean everything these days, and so that's why you see Steve Blank and Eric Reese here. Crowdfunding is the ultimate lean. It allows you to test hypotheses in market. So will people pay me money for what I am selling? Fundamental question. And I think that Chance has gotten at it, and Leo's gotten at it, but it's really important to understand that you're asking a question and you're getting answers in dollars. Next slide. Next thing, it allows you to connect with your customers. One of the things that is so exciting when you're running a crowdfunding campaign is that you get to talk to people. They tell you what features they want added in the product, whether or not they want, a blue one or a pink one, or whether or not, you learn how to prioritize. So again, it goes back to this lean concept where you're actually incorporating your customers into your development process and into your business right out of the gate. The other thing is that crowdfunding is actually somewhat of a location-based hobby for some folks. We are not, you can go to the next slide, we are not Silicon Valley here in San Diego. And we don't have tons of VC money, whether it's in, whether it's there or in New York. But crowdfunding is a great way for your community to support your company. So I think it's important that people realize that. You can go ahead. These guys have sort of alluded to it, but the biggest thing about crowdfunding is that it forces you to be a business on day one. So this entire and this is sort of a generic customer lifecycle slide, but you go out, you reach customers, you acquire them, you develop them, you retain them, and you inspire them, and that loop just keeps going. And with crowdfunding, you're basically forced to do this entire thing over a 30 or 45-day period. And if you can't do that, your company likely has problems. So what we found when we're engaging clients, what we found when we see projects is, if there is some hitch somewhere here, it usually is a telltale problem that there are bigger problems to come. If you don't have your EIN number, if you don't have an accountant, if you don't have lawyers, if you don't have good copy to sell to people, you are not going to run a successful crowdfunding campaign. So one of the things that is so nice about this is it forces you into business. Someone was asking earlier, am I a good fit for a crowdfunding campaign, software, whatever. The best thing to do is just to go to Kickstarter, kickstarter.com/help/stats. They display all of their statistics in terms of which projects get funded by vertical. There are other folks that do this. There are ways to kind of slice and dice this data a little bit more advanced, but one of the things that's so impressive, and it's small, but to date, 6.7 million people have backed Kickstarter projects. More than 2 million have backed more than one. So every day that this grows and potato salad becomes ridiculous, you're actually doing a very good thing for the community. Because most community members, or not most, but a third almost of your community members come back and give again. So Kickstarter, good business. Next slide. So what we do with companies, alongside companies, is we actually help build some tools, software tools and applications that are specifically geared at crowdfunding, at extending your reach. I love the Twilio app. We're stealing that. We help them launch crowdfunding campaigns. That's generally product strategy. It's usually media strategy. A handful of other things. And we actually strategically invest in companies that we help. So we like to think that by adding the value that we're going to add via tangible revenue and value creation, we're happy to invest alongside of our portfolio companies. What our software does, in simple terms, is we aggregate all of your contacts, all of your email lists. We've dealt with lists upwards of 90,000 people. And we actually prioritize social reach metrics, give you all social accounts, and provide full social profiles so that you sort of know what your target customer is looking to do and the best channels to go out and reach them. So I put Eric Otterson up here. I figured he'd be here, but he's not. Anyway, next slide.
Good guess.
We're actually going to be launching a Kickstarter project soon on behalf of one of our clients, a couple of whom are here. Spark Aerial, they're just in staying with the drone space. They're a San Diego-based aerial cinematography company that is launching an aerial cinematography flight school on Kickstarter. So if you ever wanted to learn how to fly a drone, we have a school that can teach you. Go ahead. In terms of if anyone has questions sort of after the event, we actually make a free checklist available. It's a Trello board, if any of you are familiar with Trello. But you can just email me, and I'll send you a link to this company, or to this webpage. Next slide. And you can just leave that up. So feel free to email me if you want a crowdfunding checklist, or, I don't know how these guys would feel about providing a deck, but I'm more than happy to provide a deck if it's helpful. Told you I would be quick. Q&A. Go ahead.
Great, I really appreciate your perspective on that conversation. Can you talk a little bit about some of the alternatives to Kickstarter, and I know some people are making white label platforms, and kind of what the trade-offs there is in terms of fees, exposure, all that kind of stuff?
So right now, there are about 1,000 crowdfunding platforms. And there's crowdfunding platforms for real estate, there's crowdfunding platforms for healthcare, there's crowdfunding platforms for software. For better or for worse, Kickstarter has become Kleenex. So there is quite a bit of marketing sort of drift that you get as a result of being on Kickstarter. Some of the biggest campaigns that have been launched have actually been launched on self-hosted websites.
Just as a quick follow-up then, are you implying that a decent percentage of the eyeballs that come to your Kickstarter campaign were not driven there by your efforts?
Of the and these guys could probably speak to it, but Kickstarter in particular, I would say that close to 80% on an average campaign, 80% of the dollars you generate are going to be out of your efforts, not out of the platform's efforts.
Precisely my point, right?
Right.
So the benefit from being on Kickstarter is potentially diminished, and we haven't talked enough about how to drive those eyeballs. Besides getting a PR campaign ready and fired up at the same point, how else do you get eyeballs to your specific campaign?
I think these guys could talk about it. It's a war. I mean, for 30 days, you are, direct emails, texting, media, basically trying to get as much exposure as you can every single day for, 30, 40 days. Kickstarter doesn't have great analytics. The more you host yourself, the more you know. You know how many visits, how many playthroughs on your video.
It's tempting to go. Indiegogo is tempting in one regard, in that you can do the option where they give you the money regardless. But there's way fewer eyeballs on it than Kickstarter. The other one you mentioned is the do-it-yourself page that you fund, open source platform to do it yourself, and then you just have to drive all the traffic yourself. So when you go on Kickstarter, you're piggybacking off their millions and millions of eyeballs that go.
4 million unique.
Plus the fact that I mentioned that these, depending if you have a retail product, the fact that vendors are trolling it for the next hottest thing.
So it's 7% cost effective?
It's a 5% Kickstarter tax. You're going to have a credit card tax no matter where you go.
7%.
2 to 3% on.
So this isn't on top of transactions?
No. Well, it's 5% to Kickstarter, 2 to 3% on transaction fees. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, so you guys are all doing, both of you have tech-related products. So do you think that that's specific to Kickstarter versus, say, if you're doing a film, you might choose Indiegogo, or if you had some sort of leading art campaign, you might choose like the local GoFundMe or something. Do you think that there's that much significant difference?
Well, Veronica Mars is a good example. It's a movie. It happened to have an online presence on a network. But they raised $6 million or something on Kickstarter, and there's lots of touchy-feely stuff that's on Kickstarter that gets funded as well. So
there are certain subject areas that Kickstarter won't allow you to fundraise on. So I think it's a bit more difficult to fundraise to raise money for your dog to get treated by a veterinarian on Kickstarter, for instance. Or sex toys is another thing that Kickstarter doesn't touch. Go ahead.
Chase, I have a question for you. You said you...
Chance.
Sorry, Chance. You said you went through, was it 50 prototypes?
Say that again?
You went through 50 prototypes before you did the
Rapid
launch.
prototype.
So,
I mean, yeah, so modifications prototype.
can you give me the timeline of that? Like, were you just holding onto the product before the Amazon thing happened to piggyback on it?
No, so that's a good question. So my partners were actually working on it before I came in. They engineered it, and they had an idea, and they didn't know how to manufacture or market it. So that's where I came in about 6 months later, and we kind of iterated. We were very hesitant on whether or not we wanted to do the crowdsource thing, or Kickstarter in general, at first, until I convinced them that we didn't have anything to lose by doing it. They wanted to go the traditional VC route, or angel funding or whatever. And I don't believe that they've raised any capital outside of the Kickstarter funding, apart from the retail interest that went on. I mean, I think they've had major vendors, including like the Amazon and Apple Store was interested in putting it in the stores, and Amazon was what wanted to carry it. It was kind of, what the impetus for actually us to get the Kickstarter campaign was the fact that we applied for the Tech Crush Harbor Battlefield and got in and put a stake in the ground of date we needed to have it done by. It actually accelerated our progress, and was like, and I think that there's a lot to be said for setting a deadline and going for it and making it happen, because it just gets you going, and you can't miss that deadline.
First, if you guys are willing to share your slides with maybe Evo Nexus, can email them out. We sure appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah.
And second, have you heard of any pros, cons, or anyone running on multiple platforms?
You don't want to do
that. No, because then you have to funnel to 2 places.
You want one place, like one conversion. As soon as you start, even if you've got a button on your page that allows people to buy and a button on Kickstarter, it's messed up. What a lot of people tend to do is, as soon as the Kickstarter campaign ends, you redirect everybody back to your site, have a big buy button with virtually the same offer. Maybe you increase price, maybe, it depends sort of your strategy, but basically, and I've heard this, and I don't know if you guys want to talk about it, but one of the tricky things with Kickstarter is you get so popular during your campaign that when you Google your name, the first thing that comes up is your Kickstarter campaign and not your own domain.
Right. Well, we considered the open sourcing, we considered Indiegogo, we considered running on multiple platforms. We decided not to do any of them because you're basically cannibalizing your own sales.
That's what I.
So and then if we had done that, we would have had half the amount on Kickstarter. Would have been a lot less of a story. And
you want a big bang.
Can you talk about the days after Kickstarter? I mean, does the sales trajectory typically continue at the rate that you see on Kickstarter? Does it drop off?
Well, if you have your e-commerce site set up and running right after, you should, we actually had like a week or 2 delay in the time our Kickstarter ended and we got our things set up, our e-commerce site set up. But in a very short time, we had in excess of $250,000 to $300,000 in excess sales on our e-commerce site. So I highly recommend you doing that.
It's really easy to set them up these days. There's like Shopify and a variety of other variety of other platforms that make it very easy for you to sell on your own domain, and there's nothing really wrong with doing so. I think it depends on what the purpose of your Kickstarter campaign was. I mean, you can run a Kickstarter campaign to sell a product, maybe as a fancy kind of mug or something, or you can do it to launch a company. If it's to sell a product, then yeah, keep selling the product on your website. If it's to launch a company, maybe you accomplished your goal with your Kickstarter campaign, and maybe you just direct people towards a newsletter sign up on your website because you don't necessarily want to deal with additional customers, and you want to reserve a further launch for them.
I think Leo's point too is, in a lot of cases, a lot of companies that I can assure you Chance's company didn't know what it meant to have 2,000 customers. Like
Well,
that.
I did.
Well, but you, at that organization really didn't understand what it meant to service 2,000 people. How do you respond to emails? How do you set up help desk? Who's going to do returns? Who's going to handle complaints? Who's going to handle media inquiries? Who's going to handle all these things? So all these companies, Kickstarter success can be a curse in some ways because some companies don't have the teams in place to deal with the realities of sort of operationally running a company in the days post-Kickstarter.
And
Can you talk about the value about having like a big name ambassador or something like a campaign?
Oh, it's huge.
Huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better way to monetize celebrity right now than I think a crowdfunding campaign.
I mean, look at LeVar Burton, right? I mean, Reading Rainbow obviously had brand, but he raised, he's a part of a campaign that raised over $5 million. It's huge. I mean, you look at, like if you look at some of the arc of a lot of Kickstarter videos, you want social proof almost embedded in your video at times, where you want people that say, hey, look at who I am, and I think these guys are great. You should back this project. It goes a long way. I can tell you throughout some campaigns that we've run, when certain people in certain communities sort of pledged, we were pretty shameless about saying, hey, this guy gave to our campaign, shouldn't you? So I think it goes a long way.
yeah,
It's invaluable.
it's hard to do though. You have to either pay them or bring them in as some kind of participating partner.
I know a large amount of dollars come from traffic you drive yourself, but did either of you tactically try to get yourself positioned on the front page of Kickstarter or try to capture?
That's not your choice.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can develop your network and try and connect to Kickstarter people, and
we did that too. So,
but Kickstarter ultimately chooses who is featured.
We were afraid we weren't going to get approved in time.
Sure, yeah.
We were because technology. There's like a 3 to 5 day lead time when they approve you. So we were like right up to January 1, and we submitted our thing, and the CES was like January 4. So. I worked my LinkedIn network and found like the CEO or someone high up at Kickstarter and shot out a thing. It's like, hey, we're doing a drone, and by the way, please approve us. And so he actually he was really stoked on our product, so he continued to. He approved right away. It was like approved next day. So I would definitely suggest